Okay, good evening, members, and welcome to the Community Wellbeing Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. I'm going to run through the agenda as per normal, starting with agenda item 1, fire evacuation procedures, and I'm obliged to say there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and the side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Thank you. Agenda item 2 is to note that the open proceedings of this meeting are being webcast on the internet. Item 3, to receive apologies for absence. I have an apology from Councillor Marks, and we will get on to his substitute shortly when we move to Diane Taylor. I'm not quite sure whether she's not coming or she's just running late. She's where? All right, she's in India, so she won't be coming this evening. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Okay. Right, item 4, resignations and replacements. Again, we have, in relation to the apology from Councillor Marks, we have Councillor Goddison, and thank you very much. And we have Councillor Eyre in replacement of Councillor Jones. Thank you very much. Item 5, declaration of conflict of interest or whipping decisions. There are nothing to say on that matter. Urgent items, there are none. Item 7 is to confirm the minutes from the last Community Wellbeing meeting held on the 3rd of September, and they are to be found at paper A. I am happy to sign those as agreed unless anybody says otherwise, committee. And I'll take that silence as a okay. Thank you very much.
Under members in attendance, we've got the initial followed by the surname, but when we get to substitutes, we suddenly get all over the place. We've got G. James for Hussey, we've got Round for Mussey, Mitchell for Marks. There's no standard.
Okay. So what you're saying, you want councillor to be...
Well, no, I think you just have the initial. It's polite and courteous, and not to have it is...
Yep. Noted. Thank you for that, Councillor Hussey. So, apart from that point, are we all okay with the minutes from the 3rd of September, committee? Yes, you did say yes before, didn't you? Okay. Member and public participation upon issues contained within the agenda. Now we have, and welcome Councillor Harvey, who was declared an interest in speaking to both papers this evening. Now, I can invite you at this point to speak to paper B, if you wish, the educational attainment paper. I beg your pardon? Thank you. Yeah, we'll take the presentation, but that's the point in the agenda where I can formally invite you to speak at this point if you wish to. Thank you. Item 9, a standing invitation to the relevant portfolio holder to present reports, their activities, etc., or bring forward policy development issues at an early stage. And we have Councillor Mrs. Osselton, Cabinet Member portfolio holder for partnerships this evening, and I believe, well, most certainly you're going to be speaking to the educational attainment paper, paper B. Thank you. Which brings us to item 10, referrals from other committees or the council. Now, that is our first paper this evening. Well, it's not actually, because we don't have a paper, but it's our first piece of business to deal with. Now, as I understand it, the protocol is that we formally receive that referral from full council. and accept, I'm speaking on behalf of the committee, and accept responsibility for that piece of work. I think in the motion in full council it was 2A Ofcom, but it's subsequently been established that it should come to community wellbeing. I'm very happy to accept that. Presumably all members are likewise. Well, clearly that means that there's a piece of work to be done, and we need to ask the officers to do that. Over time, we will receive that report. We will consider that report and debate that report at a future or future community wellbeing committees. Now, I appreciate that there are some issues that cross over possibly into other Ofcoms, but for the purposes of this evening, to receive it formally in its entirety, we are just simply saying, yes, the community wellbeing accept that referral from full council, and we will be asking the officers to prepare a report for future debate at a future meeting. Are we agreed with that? Now, this is a piece that you wanted to speak to, Councillor Harvey. I don't want to deny you that opportunity. I don't know what you want to say other than what I've said and what you said in full council, given the fact that that is where we are with it, and that's as far as we are able to take it this evening as far as this committee is concerned. Do you wish to speak or not? Thank you. You've got 4 minutes, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak this evening in the sense of the officers going forward to produce a report, and just passing a few comments hopefully that can be followed through as the mover of the motion and with Councillor Cousins as the seconder of the motion on the night. I think for us, just in terms of what's happened since the motion, the issue continues to be considerably prominent, particularly with the practices of local lenders and their activities. It certainly remains a significant issue in relation to casework that we're seeing coming through. So I'm pleased that the committee's taking it. Thank you very much for doing that and for putting it forward for a report to be drawn up. The issue, I would suggest, isn't necessarily as simply just about the payday lenders. The other aspect that we raised, and was rightly raised in our speeches on the evening, was also about other practices by other companies. For example, Bright House in the town as one example. Those issues need to be borne in mind in relation to the report. I also understand and welcome, hopefully, the news in terms of the budget that, as Councillor James said on the evening in his speech, the issue of the CAB and support for the CAB is incredibly important, and I think that's been listened to. And I think the work that Councillor Stephen Day's been doing on that is incredibly important, and his work bringing that forward as a member of the board, member of the CAB, should be welcome, but also, hopefully, the resulting money for the CAB. I would just put one plea in. If we're talking about money for Basingstoke CAB, that's brilliant, but let's not forget Tadley's CAB as well. They are two separate organisations, and I think they both need support. The issue for the officers, I think, is complex because, to be fair, Chair, and you're right, perhaps keeping it together is important, even if it does cross over responsibilities, because we're talking about lettings policy, bylaws that other authorities are looking at. The bylaws are an avenue that other authorities are using very effectively. We might be looking at planning guidance and advice on support and intervention, not just all the rules, but the support and intervention on these issues. And then obviously there's the issue of the credit union, which is a key part of taking this forward. So it's got its constituent elements that need to be unpacked properly so that we cover the issue thoroughly. It's great that we've got cross-party cooperation on this and cross-party support. Councillor Golding spoke very clearly on the council meeting, I thought very eloquently of the issues. Other members contributed very positively. I would like to see a date in the diary somewhere, if that was possible, that we can look to the CAB and Money Lifeline to come along and present to the committee, because I think in taking it forward, before the officers go off and write a report, it would be useful to hear what those organisations have to say to inform your debate and inform us of what they're facing, to give us a better rounded picture. And I hope you could bear that in mind in taking it forward, Chair. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Musson.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point. I'm sure Councillor Harvey might agree. I wouldn't restrict it to the two organisations that he suggested, because the officers may well find when they start looking through this that there are perhaps other organisations, indeed perhaps some of the lenders might want, if they believe it pertinent, to come along. So I would restrict it not to those two.
I think it would be very interesting to hear some of the lenders justify their practices, actually, and whether or not they can justify their practices. I know I have a prejudiced view on that respect because of my experience of the casework that I see. The other aspect that I think is very fair, if you're going to talk about the credit union, it might be very much worth, and doing a proper piece of scrutiny on this, policy work on it, the Sentinel's response, because Sentinel's work with the credit union is a piece of this puzzle. Their contribution to this work would be quite profound, I think. And it's what one association is doing, but not all of them. Some of the other associations aren't. So again, best practice being shared by the work of this committee could be something that would be very beneficial across all of the housing associations.
Thank you very much for that. Two good points, very well made. And I know the lead officer, Tim Bosky, has got some comments to make that will add to our the way we deal with this. And I like the idea of inviting some of the payday loan companies to speak to us. Whether they will take that up or not, I don't think we've got any powers of compulsion. We've certainly got powers of persuasion. And I think that would certainly inform the debate if we were able to get the people who seem to be causing some difficulties, but certainly I think in relation to CAB and money lenders, then certainly we would want to build that into our debate going forward. So Tim.
Really just wanted to pick up on one of the issues that Councillor Harvey raised. Yes, I fully agree it makes sense for, certainly in terms of the motion, the local branches of CAB and Money Lifeline to be invited along to the next meeting of committee, and that's what we were proposing. That next meeting is on the 7th of January, and that clearly issues that would arise from the points being made in the debate that will follow will inform future work by officers in a report that we'll bring back. I'll also take away the point that we should look to invite other organisations, persuade other organisations to attend. In terms of timescale, because as you'll recognise, it not only potentially crosses different overview and scrutiny committees, it certainly crosses different business units within the council. So I'm personally unable to give you a commitment about when the report will be produced. I would be hopeful, however, that that could be for the next meeting of the committee, which would be in March, following the January presentation.
Thank you very much for that. Are we done with that piece now? We know where we're going with it. We've accepted responsibility. We've heard the representations from Councillor Harvey, and looking to expand the inclusivity of it in terms of the people who are in that business. It would be useful to hear some organisations to explain their sort of business models and business ethics and so on. Whether they want to do that, I don't know, but they will be invited nevertheless. So thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Thank you. Can I move on to paper B, and it's educational attainment, and its status is routine matter for information. And we have with us, and thank you very much for coming along this evening, we have with us Jean Thorpe, who is the Hampshire County Council District Manager for Education and Inclusion. I think you've got the title right there. Whenever I see HCC, I used to work for Humberside County Council, and whenever I see that, I want to say Humberside, so, but I didn't, did I? So that was good. So can I ask you to do your presentations, and I hope you're willing and able to respond to questions that the committee members may have at the end of your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for inviting me this evening. I do actually welcome the opportunity to be working with the Borough Council in terms of education, because we need to work really closely. You know, we all of us share the same aspirations for our schools, and that's really important. It is somewhat daunting, I have to say. I know one or two of you, but not many of you. If I just explain my role a little bit, I'm District Manager for Education and Inclusion for Basingstoke and Deane, and that remit is very, very wide. It includes sort of standards of education, it includes issues around attendance, exclusions, head teacher recruitment, capability. If it's a really snowy day and a school doesn't know what they should be doing, they will phone me. If there's a child protection issue, they will phone me. If there is an issue around the swimming pool, they will phone me. So my remit is very, very broad. But today I'm actually talking to you about education. I'm I'm also very aware that some of you will want specific numbers and data about specific schools, and the data that I have for 2013 is not yet validated. And I know it's incorrect because the unvalidated data I do hold, because I've worked with schools in terms of their resubmission and so on. What I would like to say to you is, as soon as that data is clean and acceptable, I'd very much like to discuss that with you, and I'm more than happy to provide you with that information and to give you the papers and come back and talk to you more, because that's about you having the information that enables you to work with the schools as you do. Okay? What I'd like to do is really talk to you a little bit about the focus that has been my work and my predecessors, if you like, my colleagues' work with the schools over the recent history in Basingstoke-on-Deane, and talk to you about that sort of journey of progress and attainment and the role of the local authority. Talk a little bit about the Key Stage 2, what the trend and attainment data now looks like, and some relative comparison data I can let you have. A bit about Key Stage 4 as well. Some perspective around the factors that are affecting some of the performance, and then talk about where do we go from here and how we can work together. Put a little bit about the context. You know this context, but I think that that's a couple of points that's well worth making. Firstly, the context of Basingstoke-on-Deane is very, very broad. We have very broad socioeconomic profile. Very small schools, we have large schools, we have youngsters who have very affluent backgrounds, we have youngsters who do not have affluent backgrounds at all. And in working with the schools in Basingstoke-on-Deane, bearing that in mind and actually working with them, catering for a broad range, is a kind of key focus of my work as well. The other part that I would like to draw your attention to is that it is a large portion of Hampshire's children are educated in Basingstoke-on-Deane. We also have a large profile of SEN provision in Basingstoke-on-Deane, and some of the provision actually services youngsters way beyond the boundaries of Basingstoke-on-Deane. And perhaps also a point to make is that last point, because I think we believe that's actually significant. In the County Council, we believe that's an important point, that we have larger than average primaries and smaller than average, LA average secondary schools. And that does provide a bit of a tension at the moment, and we'll come to that a little bit later on. Right up front as well, I do need to say to you that schools are largely autonomous organisations. They are led by the leadership teams, that is the governing body with the head teacher, and the local authority, unless the school is in a category adjudged to be inadequate, so category 4 in Ofsted terms, the local authority does not have powers of intervention. I am not unable, without invitation, to work in a school. People sometimes will say to me, why is the local authority not doing more in this circumstance? And unless the governing body and the head teacher, the leadership of the school, enables us to work with them, unless they are inadequate, that is not the remit that I have, that we do not have. Now, that sounds very bald, and in reality it doesn't work like that, because one of the things that having the post of a district manager enables me to do is to build relationships with all of my schools, and that's something that is absolutely critical and fundamental to securing school improvement. There isn't one school in Basingstoke-on-Deane that I am unable to work with. Whether that is an outstanding school or a school that's inadequate, I work with them all. And when I say work with them, some of that's supportive, but there is a fair amount of that is challenge as well. Okay. Start with giving a profile of Ofsted categorisations of schools. In 07, Basingstoke and Dean had quite a low attainment profile. At Key Stage 2 and at Key Stage 4, schools were performing below the local authority and national expectations in all the key measures. And you can see the Ofsted profile there as well. Has been some considerable improvement. I've actually asterisked there and said unvalidated. And the reason I say unvalidated is that it's actually very difficult to get hold of an accurate set of Ofsted data, because in any 1 week that shifts. So I can take a point in September, for example, and try and evaluate all of the schools and national and local authority. That's very, very complex. That data doesn't easily exist. So it does move all the time. Several of my schools are being inspected this week, and actually since I drafted that set of data, there have been shifts as well. And there will have been shifts nationally. So it's fairly as accurate as it can be. What I would say is that the part that exercises me the most actually is that proportion of schools that are sitting at requires improvement stroke satisfactory. Because that is the group of schools where they are not inadequate, they're not yet judged to be good, and yet we need to focus on supporting them in becoming good. So there is a large amount of work that goes on there as well, in addition to those inadequate schools. The tension, of course, unless a school's inadequate, I don't have easy access, all right? The paper that I prepared for you made it, I think, clear that in order for youngsters to be able to leave school at 16, being confident, having the skills to be able to embark on life, it is actually at least a 9-year journey through education. And that's just looking at Key Stage 4, 3 and 2. So that's the junior age through to being 16. And when we were faced with a system that really required improvement, the strategy has been having a considerable amount of work through Key Stage 2, really robust unpicking and sort of structural support, if you like, to ensure that improvement had a stronger foundation, at the same time as supporting secondary schools in terms of bespoke work. So there's been some wholesale, robust work through the system of primary schools, and at the same time working with individual secondary schools and smaller groups of secondary schools, 2 or so together. And it has been complex, it really has. The kind of key issues that for us have been really important, has been about raising expectations of what our young people could achieve. In addition, improving teacher knowledge, subject knowledge in core subjects, particularly in English and maths, and that's been fundamental to some of the work that we've done. And wrapped around all of that has been work with schools to improve their leadership capacity. And so that's around supporting leadership teams in terms of their skills, improving layers of accountability, improving the use of data, the use of tracking, working with governing bodies, improving target setting, and enabling schools, working with schools to help their capacity ensure that the work around English and maths, the work around expectations, actually becomes part and parcel and robust within the organisations of schools. For secondary schools, from the beginning, much of that was around bespoke work in individual secondary schools, where a team of colleagues and I would work with schools, supporting them and evaluating where the strengths were, where the areas for development were, and putting a package of work together to support them individually. For primary schools, a key focus has been some bespoke work, but actually some collaborative work and some specifically commissioned work around improving writing, developing writers, looking at attainment for more able youngsters, some specific work around improving transition from infant into junior so that junior schools can actually start running with youngsters rather than delaying that intervention work. Specific work around mathematics, improving early years provision, getting the foundations right, and supporting schools in them having the skills to diagnose blockages to young people's learning and then to plan the interventions for themselves. So that has been a significant package of work. And all of that based on analysis of data, based on the local authority, the county council part funding, inspector and advisor time. Some of it's been targeted schools I would say, I want 8 of you to do this together, I will provide. And sometimes being very specific with a school and saying, actually, if you are not participating in this, my view is that your school is going to collapse in terms of its standards. Being very, very specific. So just take a little look at what has happened. I should have said at the beginning, I have actually given Tim copies of my presentation to distribute to you later. We have seen some considerable improvements in primary attainment, and in terms of reading, certainly from sort of 2010 and into 2011, across all areas actually, we've seen some considerable and more robust improvements there. So moving from a position 2008 that was below local authority, below national levels, to becoming consistently above in reading. Writing, more challenging. 2011 again saw some really strong improvements, and we've managed to sort of hold that. Mathematics has been a real success story for the local authority in terms of Key Stage 2, and I'll share some relative attainment data a little bit later on, which I think will help to show that more clearly. And then we have a new measure here, which is the combination of reading, writing and maths, which was introduced for the first time summer 2013, but I have managed to go back and unpick some of the data. The gaps are because I cannot yet get hold of it. The combination of those, of a youngster attaining a level 4 in each of those specific disciplines is now considered to be the measure of being secondary ready. And until 2013, a youngster could attain a level 4 in English, which was a combination of reading and writing, but it didn't mean, to get level 4 in English did not mean you had to hold a level 4 in both of the disciplines. It was an aggregate score based on points, but maths was always there. So that, for Basingstoke and Deane, is actually an area that we really still need to focus on. Talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Level 5, which is the measure of a more able young person, is something that we really need to chase through much more strongly. And in reading, in the summer 2013, there has been a drop in reading attainment at level 5, below the local authority, still above national, but below the local authority. And unpicking that, something I'm doing with schools at the moment, as the validated data is coming through. Writing at level 5, however, for the time, we've got some sort of real, I feel some real strength there. It feels as if there's a climb and it's more robust. Mathematics has maintained a strong level, and that is very pleasing. So one of the aspects that I'm doing at the moment is working with the school library service, working with my colleagues in the English inspection team, and putting together some specific work for specific schools around strengthening attainment in reading, ensuring that we don't take our eye off the writing ball whilst we do that, and enabling schools to be able to understand how to track and manage the progress of young people as they move through the junior school, so that, if you like, that magic Venn diagram of reading, writing and maths, those young people are able to actually be in the middle. And that if they're not going to be in the middle, we identify as early as we can, help schools identify as early as they can, where there are drops in progress and plan interventions. Minimising the fluctuations is really important, keeping that eye on all of those balls. Schools are complex organisations, but it is important that it doesn't happen that when a youngster arrives at year 6, about to leave, takes those assessments, that actually it's a surprise to a school. And I'm very confident in Basingstoke and Dean that actually most schools are very, very clear before that data is, lands back in their laps, what it's going to show. They are monitoring and checking the progress very regularly. And that goes back to the work several years ago, working with schools to develop the tracking and attainment and progress systems that are now in place. It is fair to say that in 2013, the attainment was not as high as in 2012. We had some steady improvement to 2012. There is greater progress, improvement to 2013 than the local authority overall to level 4+, but not at level 5. And one of the things that's interesting is a question really, given the kind of broad socioeconomic profile of Basingstoke and Dean, where would you place its performance compared with other districts? And for 2013, in maths, reading and writing, and all combined, Basingstoke and Dean performed above Winchester, above the New Forest, above Eastleigh, not for level 5. So in my view, I think there has been some strong success, and it's about maintaining that at Key Stage 2. I think it's fair to say that Winchester is underperforming considerably, and I expect over the next couple of years there to be some considerable improvements. But I'm meeting all of the head teachers, the primary head teachers, next Monday to discuss all of the data as it stands, and I want to say to them, I think they are doing well. On the paper that you will receive, I've actually put the data that's behind the graphs. I've outlined that there for you as well. I won't go through that now. I mentioned earlier, talking to you about the comparisons using relative measures. And we have a measure which is Fisher Family Trust measures, which enables the prior attainment of youngsters to then to be applied, or contextual factors, to be applied to prior attainment of youngsters. So, for example, the free school meal profile of a young person, the special educational needs profile of a young person, where they live profile of a young person, all to be applied to their attainment at Key Stage 1, and then to enable projections to be made about how well a young person should achieve. And that's very helpful. Ofsted and government want, rightly so, for the contextual element not to be a key part of the way of judging a school. And I say rightly so because actually all young people need to be able to attain at a high level and not to feel that they need to explain their contextual profile, and for that, if you like, to be a reason to underachieve in terms of a sort of standard measure. There has been a concern that applying a contextual measure has if you like, put a ceiling on youngsters, the expectations for youngsters, and we absolutely don't want to do that. But nevertheless, we do want to recognise that there are differences in young people. And looking at that set of data there, what that is saying, for example, is if we take the 2013 column of mathematics on the far right hand side, and we take the level 4 plus, so we're looking at the red there for maths. In 2013, if we look at youngsters' prior attainment and apply all the contextual measures, actually at level 4, the youngsters in Basingstoke-on-Deane attained 5% above that we would expect given their the contextual profile. And I have, helpfully I think, given you the other districts that are in the half of Hampshire, the area that I work in. Okay. You can see as well, although mathematics, mathematics is strong, you can see that why I say that now. But you can also see, if you look at reading and writing and English, there is no straightforward English measure anymore. It doesn't exist, which is why I could not give you a 2013 English. But in writing, in level 4 in Basingstoke, 1%, 1.3% above expectation. Not so in reading. Okay. Test Valley is doing very well. My colleague and I discuss this frequently. On to Key Stage 4 attainment has proved to be much more complex and more difficult. We have the A to C including English and Maths, but in 2012 we felt we really had a success story. We're really closing that gap, and in 2013 there has been a decline, assuming that the unvalidated data is similar to that when it's validated, and I will let you know that of course. In 2007, Basingstoke-on-Deane, however, was about 5% or so below the local authority. By 2012, that gap had closed. So we have seen some considerable improvements. But between, but the local authority and Basingstoke-on-Deane hasn't had the growth there has been nationally either. When we look at the 5 A to C's not including English and Maths, and that the English and Maths, the 5 A to C including English and Maths, that is the gold standard, the key measure that the DFE uses together with the progress measure. When we take the 5 A to C, A stars to C's without English and Maths, there has been some considerable improvement. And what's interesting for me about that is that for many secondary schools, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, Ofsted was commenting that some of the schools in Basingstoke-on-Deane needed to look at their curriculum breadth. They needed to consider the curriculum provision. And for me, the closing of that is an indicator that actually the curriculum has been broadened, that youngsters are achieving more widely. However, it's the balance and the focus to ensure that the English and Maths achievement is also brought into that level of success. And that has to be the key measure. That's what we're working on very hard now. Other measures, the baccalaureate, which are the key aspects that 3 years ago were introduced as being sort of core modern foreign language, one of the humanities subjects, science and English and Maths. And there has been some considerable improvement there, you can see that. In line with local authority, slightly above national improvement, that's pleasing to see. There's also been success in English, and you can see that there against decline in terms of the local authority and nationally since 2011. Basingstoke-on-Deane has risen. It's coming from a lower base, but it has improved. Maths has also improved, but local authority and national has as well. One of the tensions is that what schools haven't been able to do is, if I go back to that visual of notion of the Venn diagram, is that we have too many youngsters who may get 5 GCSEs, including English, or may get 5 including maths, but it's actually that Venn diagram which crosses over, they get the English and the maths together. So ensuring that that happens is considerable focus now. And similarly to that at Key Stage 2, I've given you the profile relatively, looking using the FFT measures there. 2013, it's disappointing. It is disappointing. But I think it's actually worth us unpicking the differences between the Deane schools and the Basingstoke town schools, because the relatively high attaining Deane schools in terms of the headline figures actually is masking some considerable underachievement based on prior attainment and factoring in the socioeconomic elements. Seeing the expectations this summer about 8% below expectation in the Deane, whereas the town schools, Basingstoke and Widely schools, about 5% below, and on aggregate that's about 6% below. Again, I've put there for you the data that's behind those graphs, and I've also given you a comparison of the districts there, and it is disappointing that there is no way of excusing that performance. Interesting that Winchester, although it's performing very well in terms of headline figures, it's still performing 2.9% below expectation at secondary level. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. When I look at the individual school data, there is massive variance in the schools between 2012 and 2013. And in English, there are schools that have actually gained 39% in English between 2012 and 2013, and schools that have declined by 16%. In maths, the variance is less so. And that's that point, several schools' performance didn't translate to the overall 5 because of that Venn diagram. There has been a lot of contention about the way in which the English results have come out, if you like, in 2012 and 2013. That very quickly will be resolved in terms of the way in which examination systems are being standardised, and that will, in the next 2 years, we won't have question marks of whether youngsters were entered early or entered late, and so on and so forth. That will be eradicated. But there are some tensions at the moment around the English, the changes to English curriculum, and it's quite difficult advising schools about examination boards, and it's difficult advising schools about the different syllabus to use. But we are working very closely with them. In terms of secondary performance, really trying to think hard about what is it that makes the difference between a school being successful and not. And it won't surprise you at all that this leadership, the clarity of leadership, the stability of leadership is critical. And that includes the middle leadership for core subject areas. It includes leadership being able to support excuse me, the development of strong core subject teachers. It does include governing bodies there as well. So one of the key areas that we do focus on is working with schools and their leadership teams. English, despite that improvement generally, the fluctuations are of concern to me. And the small school issue. In secondaries, we have a number of small schools, secondary schools. That means small cohorts, which gives fluctuations in terms of performance. It's more evident. But also, in a smaller school, they are less likely to have the breadth of staff to cope with staff turnover. And that has presented itself as an absolute clear issue in our secondary schools. Is recruitment and retention of high quality staff. It's very difficult. So having that capacity and resilience in schools is a tension. I talked at the beginning about the importance about relationships, and to work in schools and to be able to for schools to be really candid with me and my team, and for me to be really candid with the school. Having a good relationship, a good professional relationship is based on having a good personal professional relationship with my schools. So I do spend a lot of time working with schools and being at the end of a phone and responding to emails and helping them to unpick what's happening in their schools. Have regular meetings with schools. We will have seminars about what the data is saying. I will have subject seminars, provide training, ongoing visits. HIAS, that Hampshire Inspection Advisory Service, of which I'm part, is well regarded, and it is strong. And even schools we have a couple of schools that are academies and therefore outside of the local authority maintained structure, still buy in, and I still have a relationship with those schools. The County Council has also funded an annual visit for all schools, regardless of their Ofsted status, if you like. And that enables us to work with the school, helping to examine their data, look at the fine detail of their data, because I've given you very broad headlines and you will be well aware that there's always stories underneath. That enables us to monitor the quality of teaching with schools. It enables us to work with governing bodies. In any one week I will spend 2 evenings a week working with governing bodies or doing training for schools. It also enables us to help schools prioritise their work, and then they will commission us. Sometimes we will part fund that as well. Most of the work that we do in schools will then be, a formal report will be drafted, and that will go to the governing body. So we're assisting a governing body in understanding their work, holding schools to account as well. We're also involved, commissioned though, to work with schools in terms of head teachers' performance management. And that's what I'm doing tomorrow. I have one of those sessions. So that enables me to work with the governing body in supporting them in ensuring that performance targets are related to the real issues that the school has. And also commissioned by the County Council are some themed focus visits. So for example, in the summer I visited all secondary schools to actually examine their provision for youngsters in receipt of free school meals, and the use of the pupil premium funding, and all schools will have a secondary report, report of that visit. All secondary schools will have a report of that visit. Incidentally, the performance at Key Stage 2 of youngsters in receipt of free school meals, unvalidated yet, but looks strong, as does the performance of boys, which looks very strong as well, which is quite encouraging given where it has been in the past. The performance of youngsters in receipt of free school meals at Key Stage 4 GCSE level is not strong. So the challenge is, given that set of data and where we are, we review our approach to working with schools and the agenda, if you like, all the time. I'm asking of myself and my team and of schools at the moment is, how are secondary schools ensuring that their curriculum, their provision is appropriate for those higher attaining youngsters who are now, or those youngsters in Basingstoke who are arriving in Year 7 into their schools, who are actually achieving better than they have ever done before. How are we ensuring that they are ready for that? The question again is, how am I going to support primary schools in strengthening that reading and writing provision and the attainment for more able youngsters? Strengthening secondary schools is something that I revisit frequently, given that we have a high number of small schools, and trying to work with secondary schools to help them collaborate and work together to consider sharing resource and expertise to negate for the fact that they actually do not have the financial resource to perhaps have every layer of expertise that they would wish. That's something that's quite a challenge as well. Trying to stabilise schools through leadership tensions that we have. I'm sure, are well aware that we have had some key headship vacancies. I have had a phenomenal number of headship recruitment processes in the last 18 months. Absolutely phenomenal. I couldn't even tell you now. I did know how many, but it is unprecedented. And at the moment I think I have 8 running, not all secondaries, 8 processes running, trying to ensure that if there is a head of a school that doesn't have a leader, a substantive leader in place, that I will commission somebody, work with other schools and governing bodies to release somebody to cover that with some additional local authority support. So stabilising the school through those tensions, because it is very unsettling, is also a key part of work. And another element that I need to work more at, and have a meeting next week about, is trying to maximise opportunities that the teaching school, that Dove House, a special school, it's an academy, if it has teaching school status, try to maximise the opportunities that they may be able to give to Basingstoke and Dean. They are now able to provide a teacher training element to their work, and actually, given that we find it difficult to recruit, not just at Basingstoke and Dean, but there are tensions around recruitment of staff. Having that in Basingstoke, I hope, is something that we ought to try and maximise. Reflecting on how I can work with you and you can work with me, I do believe that helping to brief you more regularly with accurate data and sharing the successes and sharing the tensions, I think is a positive step, and I hope it's something that you would want to happen. I think it's important that we do help the community to understand that we do have a strong primary provision. We have strengthened. There has been real improvement in the primary schools in Basingstoke and Dean, and it's something that we should be very, very proud of. I think also acknowledging that have been some real improvements in Ofsted terms. We do not have a maintained secondary school in Basingstoke and Dean that is judged to be inadequate at the moment, and that's something that hasn't been in place for some time. And whilst I absolutely accept we have schools that require improvement and that isn't good enough, not being judged to be inadequate is also a significant, important thing to acknowledge. recognising that the socioeconomic element, the relative improvement, I think is important. Schools, I mentioned earlier that at Key Stage 2, Basingstoke schools are doing better than Winchester schools, and that's not even relatively, that's actually in the headline scores. Relatively, they're doing really well. And in terms of small schools, and I've left that with a question mark, because I think there are tensions around the small schools that we have, the small secondary schools, and I think that that's something that we're going to have to think hard about, and consider what it is we can do to assist those smaller schools, because I think there will be tensions there. The viability of a school, when we're looking at 400, 500 students in terms of the provision, it is of concern. We currently have a drift of youngsters at Key Stage 2 as they move into Key Stage 3 into Winchester and Alresford area. I think Henry Beaufort, Perrins secondary schools have got youngsters from Basingstoke-on-Deane. That does not help the small schools situation, the numbers that are on roll. I'm led to believe that it won't be very long before the numbers in Winchester and Alresford actually mean that all the places in Winchester will be required for their catchment youngsters. But that hasn't happened yet. So trying to help those who are making choices about their young people, the schools that they're going to be going to, Basingstoke-on-Deane is a good choice, is something that we need to get underneath the skin of. And really, it's now over to you to ask questions of me.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I mean, that was a huge amount of information. You've clearly, no, don't apologise, that was really superb. A huge amount of information for us to get to grips with, if you like, and we'd certainly welcome a copy of the presentation that Tim already has. And can I say, without wanting to embarrass you, very extremely well articulated as well. You've got a huge role there. And I think you're achieving some superb things within the county, and certainly for Basingstoke-on-Deane. I also know that this is the first time we've done something like this, if I could say that way. And I welcome your offer to come and speak to us over time to this committee. That would be really quite splendid to hear more positive statements, and to look at the less than positive issues that are clearly there as well. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask Councillor Harvey to come forward. I know you want to speak to this item, Councillor Harvey, so before I open it up to questions within the committee, and you're quite happy to take questions, I think Councillor Harvey wants to just make, they're not questions directed to the officer, you want to make a contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Can I welcome Jean's presentation? And I know Jean as being a governor at the Vine and the work that she's done with the Vine recently. And can I say, the quality of the advice and the quality of support that we've had from her team, and Jean has been absolutely superb, and is a testament really to the relationship of the local authority with its schools. And that needs to be said, I think, really said. It's interesting because, I mean, when I started to think about what I wanted to say tonight on this subject, particularly because of our experiences at the Vine, I was to go back, and Ron will appreciate this, going back to Cabinet 10 years ago with Don Allen as the old county and it's sort of like the Don Allen effect, if you like, of this peaks and troughs, the relationships between county and the borough. And I think Don got it, that there had to be a strong relationship between the borough and county. So as an old cabinet member for employment, skills and learning as was, and as the council leader, that relationship was really important, because the borough does have a role to play, and it is about supporting and enhancing what the county does, and we need to fulfil that relationship. So I would be looking for this committee and the cabinet to take that on in terms of the future direction of travel, I think. And it is difficult for county because they look county-wide. They can't always just focus in on Basingstoke, and it's this county-wide perspective, and we can bring that to them in terms of the support we offer, Jean. We have got 11 secondary schools, and it is difficult to deal with the issues that reflect across those schools. It is about geography, it is about where they're placed and their relationship to the communities around them. And the issue with the small school is, while it is difficult for Jean, and I respect the team in terms of an education perspective, those schools have a tremendous relationship with their communities because they are smaller schools in the community setting. And one of Basingstoke's strengths are our community schools, and that relationship needs to be borne in mind. So it is difficult when you face, and I think this is the challenge, a situation of competition between the schools, and the schools find themselves, because of a certain direction of travel, being forced into more competition, teacher against teacher, let alone student against student and school against school. The cooperative relationships that we need to see established, the collaborative relationships, are something this council has had a very good role at brokering and going forward on recruitment and retention, on relationships that aren't just through the children's partnerships. And this is the point I'd like to leave you with, Chair. Those children partnerships are really important, but they're multi-agency. They're not about the schools themselves coming together as the schools around the table. And that's perhaps an area that we can support in, because those head teachers working together and those teachers working together, when you're trying to find 11 heads of maths and 11 heads of English that are going to have the quality across all those schools, that's a relationship that we can really help with. So in terms of our work, if you like, maybe some areas to think about: recruitment and retention and support, brokering relationships between the schools. And just the other thing, child poverty. There's actually communities in Basingstoke, and this is, as it were, perhaps the scandal we need to think about. There are certain communities in terms of child poverty that have real issues, and there is a community in Basingstoke that sees itself suffering 29% child poverty. Now that has a direct relationship, doesn't it? Where you are born determines your educational, and that's a massive issue for us in Basingstoke because the geography is so important, as Jean has rightly pointed out. Those are the sorts of thoughts I think that as a borough council we can really help the county with and help them lead with. Leave that with you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Okay, so Jean, you've said you're happy to take questions, and thank you very much for that. Any questions, Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. I have got several questions. May I put them all at the same time? Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Thank you very much for your indulgence. Can I also thank Jean very much for that presentation. I too have worked with Jean before I retired, and I can commend her extreme support for all of our schools and very hard work, and I can certainly attest to the fact she doesn't only support, she also challenges in an appropriate manner, and that is something I wanted to say publicly tonight. Jean, I have got several questions I would like to ask, and I'm mindful, you said at the beginning you may not have all of those facts, so if you don't have them, I'm quite happy to take a written answer later on. My first question is, how many of our children in secondary schools in Basingstoke and Dean are being taught English and maths by adults who are not specifically qualified to do so? Because I believe that is part of our problem.
I don't have the answer to that, but could I ask you what you mean by not specifically qualified to do so, please?
I mean somebody who is either a qualified teacher but not of English or of mathematics, or somebody who is not a qualified teacher of anything.
Okay, I'll take that question and I will see if I can find the answer for you.
My next one is, can you tell us how many unfilled vacancies there are in our secondary schools for teachers of English and maths? It sort of links with that first one.
I can't. It's quite a number. I will go back to you on that.
Thank you. And you mentioned that turnover of staff is an issue. And I wondered if you might be able to find out for us what the annual turnover of teaching staff in our schools is and how that compares with other parts of Hampshire.
I'll do that.
Nearly there. You also mentioned this business of the drift of children to the schools in Winchester, and the fact that, whichever way you look at it, hopefully perhaps soon Winchester will have enough children of its own to fill its own schools, and we can keep our children here in Basingstoke. What is the size of drift of children to the schools in Winchester? And you say that one of the priorities is to manage that drift, but I just wonder whether you could help the other members of the committee by saying what actually can be done to manage that drift, if anything, working with the head teachers of the Winchester schools.
I don't have the drift from September. And actually, I've asked for that data, so I will furnish you with that. It was actually less than had been trailed. The last percentage was less than had been trailed, actually, so more positive. But I will get that data for you. It's in terms of what can schools do, what can we do. I think it goes back to a point that Councillor Harvey made, in the sense that I think there is something about the collaboration of schools actually working closely together and recognising the strengths that they do have, and having some sense of coherence. But whilst we have schools where attainment is not high enough, that isn't at the moment compelling enough reason for parents to make the choice for young people. So it has to be about getting the provision right. At the same time is collaboration and celebrating what the many schools in Basingstoke do very, very well. And just on that point, there are schools that have been judged to be inadequate, and the Vine, for example, was in that position a couple of years ago, where they will have departments within their schools that are outstanding departments. And the Vine, for example, in terms of performing arts, any school, it would be stronger than any other school in Basingstoke and Dean through that time of it being judged inadequate. So it is about celebrating the strengths that schools have as well, making that very overt.
Could I just ask a quick, or say something as a supplementary? I'm sure I'm not the only member of the committee that would be very keen to hear that, yes, you are going to go and congratulate these teachers at Key Stage 2 in particular for ensuring that the children in the schools in Basingstoke and Dean are actually outperforming, significantly outperforming the children of the schools in Winchester. I know not all, but not by all measures, but what I've heard you say tonight is actually the performance overall is statistically is stronger in Basingstoke and Dean and in Winchester, and that's a key message that needs to be got out, not just to the teachers but to the parents of those children as well.
Yeah, I think we've all heard that, and that's a very important message for this committee and this borough. So I hear from you that that's what you're going to do anyway, because it's part and parcel of the progress that you're making anyway.
I would, on that front, I absolutely right, and I will be clearly making that message, giving that message to the schools. I suspect the councillors in Winchester will be very concerned to hear that message as well.
Could I just, I know Councillor Mrs Wildridge is wanting to speak next, but if I could just, it follows on from that question in relation to how we're communicating, or how the county and you are communicating with the boroughs that fall within the county like this. I'm not entirely sure that this is replicated in all the other boroughs that you work with. And I think we can take some pride in having grabbed you first, if I could put it in those terms, that you come and speak to us, and we can have some idea about the collaboration and the progress that we're trying to achieve for our young people. So that message, you know, if we lead the way, if you like, so that Winchester councillors, for example, pick up the fact that you're speaking to us here, and we are applauding you, and at the same time asking for more, if you like. That's a good message to be able to relay to other boroughs that haven't quite engaged with you in this way yet.
Absolutely. My colleagues who will work with their districts in the same way aren't doing this. I'm aware that one of my colleagues maybe last year spoke to the Test Valley equivalent, council, but I certainly not in this way. And I think going back to this being an opportunity for us to build and ensure that we continue to discuss, that's the critical thing, really, isn't it?
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Wildridge.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you also for your really interesting presentation this evening. I like David there. I've got quite a few questions, if you don't mind. So please stop me if you think I'm going on too much. First one.
I will.
I know you will. I'll stop at you. First one, just my own curiosity really, because a few years ago, sort of science always used to be in the mix in terms of sort of performance. It always used to be English, maths, and science. I just maybe me was sort of an ignorant question, but why isn't that included in the figures?
The measure that DFE uses is 5 A star to C GCSEs, including English and maths, and that's it. Of course, there is data around the science, there's data around every subject, and at the moment, until we get the unvalidated data, I haven't scrutinised it in great depth, although I do have it. And my head of science for the county, he will be doing that and looking at that quite closely. But when there is a key measure that DFE prescribes, that's what we will kind of look at. And one of the really important things has been to help schools understand the measure against which they're going to be judged, because it can be quite tempting to be very clear about all those other aspects, and then all of a sudden you're kind of caught without having that clarity.
My next question is about class sizes. You haven't sort of mentioned it too much today, but you touched on it a bit. But have they been increasing in recent years, and are they likely to increase based on predicted trends in the next few years? Have you got any information on that? Both sort of at primary and secondary school, if you've got information.
I don't have that information. I think it's unlikely to change. Schools are funded per pupil, and therefore class sizes are going to. If one wanted to have small class sizes, one would need to have would need an enormous budget, and given that schools are funded per pupil, that's very, very difficult. I am sure that there will be class size information available. I don't have that to hand, but I wouldn't envisage, I may be wrong, I wouldn't envisage there being much of a shift in where it is now.
As a supplementary, if there is, I don't want you to go to too much trouble, but if there is information, could you include that with the written responses that you give to David, please? Thanks. My next question is about more support within schools, which I know isn't absolutely directly linked to educational attainment, but it is very much being part and parcel of it, as I'm sure you would agree. And I just wondered whether you feel that, given that the connection service is no longer sort of there, whether this is having an impact on the educational attainment of some of those students, whether at the higher end or at the lower end, in that they're not having that personal support in some cases from the personal development connections advisors that were there. But there's the earlier careers advice, which may have sort of pushed them into achieving more. So just your thoughts on that, really.
Purely my personal thoughts. I think schools have worked very hard secondary schools have worked very hard to get hold of that agenda, and to ensure that the provision, that the organisation and provision in schools is actually addressing that. I think schools have worked very hard at recognising that quality first teaching has to be fundamental, because that is what is going to raise attainment for youngsters, and that's about high quality staff, and they are, schools I think in Basingstoke and Deane are now very robust about managing staff performance, and then looking at interventions as being that, interventions and additional support to what is high quality, as opposed to something to compensate something that isn't high quality necessarily. In terms of that careers advice, I don't know for sure. I think it would be quite interesting for you to get a view from the secondary schools as to what they felt.
Linked to the sort of the fact that there aren't connections as much in the schools anymore, or indeed at all. I know one of the roles of connections was to sort of collect the NEET statistics of year 11s when they left, and I just wondered whether is that one of your roles as well, and whether you collect, have you got any information about what the neat statistics are of the Basingstoke secondary schools, and whether, if so, you could pass that on to us as one of your written answers as well, please.
It's my role to receive that information from those that gather it. I don't have it for this year. In fact, I think I might have 2012 fairly recently, but I will get that information to you.
Thank you. May I ask who does gather it now, in the absence of connections? Because I do know it used to be. And yeah, could you have 2012 and then 2013 when you get that, please? Thank you.
I'm not entirely sure who does gather it, but I know I receive it. So somebody sends it to me. I will ask, and I'll get what information I can get for you.
Thank you. Recruitment and retention, which you touched on, David's touched on. Can I probe a little deeper on that one? And why do you think there is such a problem with recruitment and retention of staff, and in particular sort of leadership staff at this time? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I don't know why there is a great deal of tension around that, difficulty. I think it's absolutely true to say, we have found there has been a huge turnover of senior staff, and for personal and professional reasons, without doubt. We have had unprecedented numbers of headships. It was in Basingstoke indeed unprecedented, no doubt at all, and looking for high quality subject leaders in terms of secondary, in terms of English and maths and science, has been difficult. But I don't know why that is, whether it is about staff feeling that actually they don't want to take on that level of responsibility, given the educational or the climate that is there. But that is, I'm really posing a question. We don't know. In terms of retention, I touched on the fact that schools are very, very clear that they must demand high quality teaching from their staff, and are accountable for that and are robust around that. That of course means that if staff are not as strong as they need to be, head teachers, leadership teams will address that, and undoubtedly that creates tension in terms of, am I going to be running with a vacancy, or do I take somebody who I believe is not as well, whose expertise is not as strong as I would like it to be? And that is a tension for schools. It really is, and I suspect that is also part of the retention profile.
Thank you very much for that. Now, Councillor Cousins, please tell me you haven't got a couple of dozen questions like your colleagues had.
I do, but hopefully they're quite quick.
Okay, I'm counting.
Okay. First one, I believe, is one for the written answer bank, which is, could you, Jean, please provide us with the level of teaching days lost due to absence and advise whether this is rising, falling or static? Something along the lines of the last 5 years would be good, please, if possible. Leading on from that then, Jean, could you please tell us...
Sorry,
oh.
Councillor Cousins, do you want to ask them one at a time rather than load them up?
I was assuming that one would be into the written bank, so I was moving on to the next question.
Okay, go
ahead. So one which hopefully you can answer tonight for us, Jean, is what specific support and intervention has been undertaken by the Hampshire Inspection and Advisory Service with our schools, and what impact that intervention has had?
Really very wide ranging. So for any school that is judged to be RI or inadequate, typically it would involve a high level action plan that's drafted. It would be a designated and attached English inspector. It might have an attached maths inspector. It might be science. Depends on the key issues. It might be all of those. There would be a higher level of local authority involvement in terms of working with the leadership team, working with the governing body. I would be monitoring on a termly basis, sometimes more frequently, against key issues that have been identified, so judging teaching and learning, supporting the school. So it would be a mixture of challenge but also some intervention support as well. So it could be a myriad of things, but it's bespoke, and it's generally funded 50-50 school and local authority. There was another question and I can't remember what that was. Oh yes, teacher absence days. I will check that. Whether or not that's something I'm able to furnish you with, I don't know.
Thank you. Leading on from that, you mentioned the leadership teams, and where leadership teams are described as unstable, what steps are taken to support those leadership teams?
Depending on what unstable means, it could mean that I ask a governing body to release a head teacher from another school and therefore put in place a secondment for a period of time. Could be full-time, it could be part-time. It might be that I fund one of my team to work in school for closely, so in a specific subject department, 1 day a week, 2 days a week for a period of time in order to coach and mentor somebody. It could be that local authority might provide some additional governors or find additional governors to support the improvement of governing body. And it might be that the local authority applies to the Secretary of State to remove a governing body and puts an interim executive board in place for a period of time. So a very wide-ranging, something small to something quite large.
Yeah, one more, and it does lead on because it's sort of preemptive, which is how is best practice shared across our schools to improve them and, of course, therefore improve the education of our children?
I commission quite a lot of school-to-school support, actually. Part of that is around, and that's where the relationship bit comes back again. If a school is good and outstanding, I want them to be working with another school that is less strong. But the tension for a governing body is, actually we don't have spare people floating around. We don't have a bottomless budget. How do we make sure that this works without it being to the detriment of our school? So trying to broker that with a school, and then what I might do is give the donor school, for example, some additional of my time to compensate for their loss, or those sort of aspects. So putting school-to-school support together is something I do quite a lot of.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, there are more questions to come. I'm sorry about that. Well, I'm not sorry about that, actually, because I think this reflects the level of interest and to have this kind of dialogue. And I think it's great that you're able to be here and help us understand better. So I have Councillor Mussons, then Councillor Bound, and then Councillor Tomlin, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can I say, first of all, I was pleased when we embarked on this, because it's something that's been close to my heart for a long time. I'm from the Tadley area, and I think we always felt, and other people might disagree, that in Tadley we had a very broad spectrum of educational background, or let's say, you mentioned affluent areas and poorer areas. I think in Tadley it seems to me to be very challenging for schools. One of the problems I've come across when I was a governor, and I still hear it now from parents, and I wonder, and I don't think we've addressed it tonight, which is a pity, hence the question, and that is, I'll give you a scenario. I hear from a parent that they have a child that's particularly challenging and they don't feel they're getting the help from the school. When I've approached schools about that, and when I was a governor I heard it there too, and it seems to be there's a kind of a threshold. If your child is bad enough, let's use that phrase because I'll think of another one, to be above the threshold level, you will get extra help for the school to actually deal with the child and try to help them to have a better attainment. The unfortunate side of that, and of course statistics don't show that, because in there we know if it's an average there are people below and above. If your child is below that average but not enough to be, let's say, above the threshold, there's nothing done. There's no additional help. The school have to try to do it on their own, and the school tell me, well, we don't really have the time and the resources. So you almost have to say to the parents, if your child could just be a bit worse, a bit better, then perhaps they could get some help, but unfortunately they can't. What can we do? How can we start to address that? I understand resources, cash shortages, etc., but it's frustrating, particularly when you come from an area like Tadley where there's such a broad spectrum, and you see children that are very capable of attaining good results, but you've got so many others that aren't, and it just seems that we can't get the help because they aren't quite coming up beyond the threshold.
There's been over time, there's been a considerable change in the way in which schools are funded, and there is not a threshold above which you would get additional funding to support a young person anymore in the way in which that might have been the case. If a young, I think you're talking about if a child might have special educational needs, for example. If a child has a statement of special educational needs, unless the statement is of a particular type, and that is a very narrow type, the money is already in schools. The amount of money that's been delegated from the centre to schools actually is intended to cover the myriad of needs of a young person. There is no additional funding for a child to sort of move, depending on the strength of a child, anymore. And so in one sense I understand what you're saying about that being difficult. On the other hand, I think it's positive that a child being bad enough, if that was the phrase, then accesses more funding. I think I have a struggle with that in some ways in any case. One of the things that the data, you're quite right, does not show is the subtleties inside it. And one of the analyses that I've done with the primary, the junior results, is that yes, they are looking strong, but actually within that level 4, for the first time there is a high proportion of level 4s that are at the lower end of level 4, not really, really secure level 4s. And so the challenge that for me, in the way in which I'm talking to my primary colleagues about the data, the challenge for me is to talk to my secondary colleagues about, you are receiving young people who have hit the threshold but at a low level. How are you going to use your funding, your school budgets and the interventions that you already have planned? How are you going to shape the provision to address, to meet the needs of those young people as early as they join you, in order that that gap doesn't widen? So helping schools to consider the way in which they plan their interventions earlier. In terms of the question around how do you address that, there is no pot of money to try and secure, if that's what you're asking, that there are no funds available for that. What I think is quite interesting is that I do have schools that, and it goes back to the point about brokering school-to-school support, I do have schools that may have a lot of challenge in youngsters' behaviour or youngsters' needs, and yet do a very, very an effective job at closing that gap and addressing it. And it's about helping schools to work with those schools.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. There's a bulge going through the primary school system at the moment in terms of pupil numbers. Has the authority also worked on a programme to cater for this bulge, which you must have known about for quite some time?
It's outside of my brief, but I can tell you what I do know. At the moment, when I last looked, we had about 17% capacity in Basingstoke secondary schools, which is quite a big capacity. There is a bulge moving through the primary phase, and it's at the lower end of primary at the moment, and we are well aware of it. And there is discussion at the moment about how will that manifest itself into secondary. So the planning is happening now, and yes, we are aware of it and doing the work and the thinking at the moment with it in sufficient good time. That is the intention.
So second question sort of vaguely leads on to that. I mean, possibly recruitment is already a bit of a problem. So do you foresee recruitment problems then in the future? If you're going to have more children through, you're going to have bigger classes, or you're going to have to more classes, so you perhaps need more teachers. Where are these teachers going to come from? And I believe there's a problem with teacher training.
I don't know about teacher training at all, I'm afraid. In terms of recruitment, I don't know where people are going to come from. I'm always being asked if I have got people up my sleeve, and I genuinely don't, but I do my very best to appeal to schools to release people. They may have some surplus and so on. As a local authority, we don't employ staff. It's the governing bodies that employ staff, and that's one of the tensions, if you like. And it's where, going back to the Dove House being a teaching school and teacher involved in the sort of teacher training, I'm hopeful that we can sort of benefit from that, and it may well be that something that the council may be looking at in due course is about ensuring that Basingstoke is seen and understood to be as attractive as it is to come and work in. You are, of course, up against it in terms of London waiting allowance, etc., etc.
And I hope that wouldn't mean perhaps that we'd be taking on teachers who weren't trained as in free schools, but that's a personal view. However, the reading, writing and maths that makes you secondary ready, they can get a level 4 and level 4, but if that's level 4, do you break it down to level 4C, B and A as in the past? So they could all be level 4C and still be secondary level?
Yes, they could be, and are considered to be, but you are absolutely right, and which is why I have already looked at the data to see that in reading there is a higher proportion of young people who are at level 4C, if you like, so the bottom, the weaker level 4 than there was in 2012, and have written to my secondary schools to let them know this, and have advised them to plot out transition matrices, so exactly who has got what and where, so they're very, very clear who their young people are who are at the bottom end of that, so that in term 1 and term 2 of year 7 they have reviewed the provision for these young people, shaped it so that these young people are certainly secure level 4s as quickly as possible in order to tackle the rest of the curriculum. That's particularly important in reading, in the sense that evidence indicates that if we get that to be strong level 4s, those young people have got a much better chance of attaining the 5 A to C, including English and maths.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tomlin, I'm going to make that the last question before we move into debate.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jean. That was, you also have a very interesting job and challenging job, I think, no doubt. Slightly different sort of question. Have you got in your data any sort of correlation or evidence that where we end up putting housing and developments and how it challenges schools, in the sense that I certainly know in my area a housing development came and expanded a school beyond all belief, and it probably wasn't quite ready for it, and that caused all the situations of it dropping standard and heads and leadership teams. Is there much evidence with it, or are there more factors than sort of expanding schools a little bit too quickly?
I'm going to give you a personal view here, because I don't have any evidence, but in a former life I was a head teacher of a brand new school that started with 49 children and in 6 years had 620. So I actually believe personally that if you have a robust leadership team and the planning is in place in terms of the school internally, that it is possible to have a very strong school. But I understand what you're saying, and it is about planning, and it's about and so I don't know that there is a correlation. I do know that there is that the analysis that we've done in secondary schools is that larger secondary schools are considerably stronger than smaller secondary schools. And one of my very first slides says that we have a larger proportion than the local authority of large primaries and a larger proportion than the local authority of small secondaries. And of course, whether that is a genuine correlation or happenstance, I don't know. In expanding a school, I think it is very important that we have a proper implementation plan working with the school, and I've got 2 schools that I do work with in terms of those aspects. One of them actually isn't in my district, but it's due to my previous experience that I'm working with, because I think in the same way it's not even about expansion, is it? It's about change. In the same way, any change in an organisation that isn't planned for can create a level of turbulence. So don't know about the correlation, but if there is expansion, we need to work quite closely with the school to help them get it right.
Sorry, I'll just 2 more, and then a lot of them obviously have been answered, or you're going to answer. Ofsted measures English, as you outlined, English and maths, etc. I'm pretty aware, and I'm sure we all are, that there are some interesting languages being spoken as we walk around the town, where, possibly has there been some demographic change where it's affecting us, where English isn't necessarily the primary language. Is that all factored in at all, or do you see anything like that?
It doesn't have any effect in terms of factoring the attainment. The attainment measures stand as they are. When we get the validated data, the county data team will do a full analysis on the attainment and progress of youngsters who've got additional language, and I then will get a breakdown of what that looks like in respect of each of my schools. We have a very good ethnic minority achievement service that's actually based in Basingstoke, works with all the schools, and I know they support many of the schools in Basingstoke very well.
Thank you. Finally, the last one, I don't know, something, maybe this is something the borough, we can help with, but will it be in your remit? How is it looking for... We have quite a thriving industrial base in Basingstoke, a lot of companies, a lot of high-tech companies. There's a lot of entrepreneurial, clever people out there, and getting those people to come into schools, to present to schools. In my experience, it's been the other way around, that schools always look for work experience to give the child or student an experience. But is there much going on the other way around to encourage some of these people to come in and tell people that, in fact, that maths and English actually do have an incredible use? And that's maybe something that we, through our contacts with businesses, could bring to this party. So that's really a comment, perhaps. Thank you.
I think you're right. I don't know what's going on, certainly talking to individual schools, but I would definitely see it as something that you and your contacts and the relationships that you have would fit very well.
That fits very well with the whole point of this piece, doesn't it? That we now that we have that knowledge from you, as first stage, we can actually expand that within the borough and take that forward in our roles as borough councillors. So that's been extremely helpful. You'll be pleased to know that that's the end of the Q&A. You're very welcome to stay and listen to the debate if you wish, but my guess is you're pretty exhausted. You've been speaking for well over an hour. And just to say on behalf of the committee, thank you very much indeed for the presentation, the work you're doing, and the way you've expressed it to us, and you've certainly enhanced my understanding of how it works. And I think you'd be a very popular return guest speaker in relation to this issue. So thank you very much indeed, Jean. Thank you. Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, get out while you can. Actually, yeah. Thank you very much indeed, Jane. Thank you. Before we move into debate, I'm going to ask the portfolio holder, Council Mrs. Osselton, to step forward and offer the committee her comments at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Jean and I'm working with her. Towards the end of last year, the administration was a little bit worried about what we were hearing with regard to our academic achievements, especially in the secondary schools in Basingstoke. So a deputation here, myself and some of the officers and our leader, met with then Roy Perry, who was in charge of education. It's now Keith Mann and Peter, I forget his second name anyway. And we put our concerns to them. I then contacted and was invited to attend the head teachers meeting in Basingstoke. So they welcomed me, and I must say that I too would like to say thank you very much to our teachers in the borough for all they're doing and for the head teachers. I then asked if I might go in and visit every secondary school in the borough. To date, I have been in and I have visited 6. I have another 5 to go, and I shall be going in to talk to them. Now, they've welcomed me. They didn't have to have me in, but I went at their invitation, and we had very frank discussions with them. And some of the things that they've been talking about, we did parent participation. How do parents fit in, especially in the secondary education? We talked about Ofsted. We talked about leadership and staff issues, recruitment and retention. We went into depth on Key Stage 4, that's 14 to 16-year-old, how they were performing. The GCS results I have for last year, but the date, as Jean was saying, is not up to date, and I won't have them until January. We've got a lot of new head teachers now in the schools, and a lot of new staff. Training seems to me to be excellent. Probably you can never get enough of training. We talked about the baby boom. We are going to see an increase in numbers of children shortly from into the primary and secondary education system. We talked about children moving out of schools and why this is happening, and it's not as bad as it makes out, but we are losing a lot of children out of the borough to, say, into the Winchester schools and further afield, and we've known this for a little bit of time. We talked about governors and how they can help a little, how we can help them a bit more. And I think out of what has come, and I will be writing a report on this with officers when I've been to the other 6, what I've seen is, I think, we need some positive messages going out there. We need to say that our schools are good. We are, because it's like the rotten apple syndrome. You start saying there's a rotten apple and it goes round and round and round, and we've got to get off that treadmill. We are achieving in Basingstoke, and we are going forward with teachers, leadership, etc. that's going on. And in 3 of the schools I went, I was particularly I just couldn't believe how much the teachers gave after school to their students. It was very good. Now, we're doing a 2-pronged approach, because we're already going in. I go in with the officers. We know how the teachers feel. We know how we can help them. We've already said we go in and help with careers, evenings, etc. So they've told us in the report I should be writing what they would like us to do, and we will be going in there from the borough to help. Now, one of the things we do talk to them about, again, for their educational attainment, is the skills employment and partnership. So we will put in, we will, now how can I put it? We are talking to the head teachers, etc., about their students, and we've started with secondary. I hope to go into primary later. And we work with the Job Centre, Housing Associations, Basingstoke Learning Partnerships, Women's Wisdom Job Centre, and the businesses in the borough. And science and engineering, you were asking, is very much to the forefront. So we're looking at these students that are coming through, and we're looking to see what are the jobs that we need in Basingstoke.
so that Basingstoke children stay in Basingstoke. It's quite a big project, but we're getting there, and it will take time slowly as they come through. And those that were the school of 2008, we can see how they progress now because we've got a baseline in 17 and in 18. So, as I say, we're working with all our partners for the best for the children in Basingstoke so that we can move forward. So we're not doing nothing, as you might say, in the borough. We're doing quite a lot of work. And I'm just so pleased that the head teachers, I've been allowed to go in and talk to the head teachers, and I'm hoping that I will go. They have I don't think it's monthly or quarterly meeting of all the head teachers. I've been to one of them, and I hope they will invite me back and I can get feedback from them how the borough is helping. But there will be a report written from the officers on that in time. So I just wanted you to know that we are going forward in our partnership work.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mrs. Osselton.
Oh, can I just say one thing? That we have asked for the statistics for the schools, individual schools. I think Tim Bosky will say we're going to get the stats now for the schools each year. I think that's what we're looking for, isn't it? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we have very detailed trend data up to 2012, and we've been asking the County Council when we'll be able to receive the the results, the 2013 results. Normally we get those through the DCSF in January, but we're interested if we can get hold of them beforehand. But as Jean explained earlier, they're unvalidated at the moment, and understandably the county won't release those to us until they have been validated. As soon as they are available, then we can make them available to members, as Jean agreed. We're quite happy then to show what the trend data is, to add those to our continuing trends, just so you can get that complete picture. And I was very pleased to hear that Jean was more than happy to come back to talk to committee when that data is available, and she can further explain the trends.
Thank you, Councillor Osselton. Thank you, Tim. I'm going to open it up to debate. I would like to think that we don't need to have a massive debate. We've covered an awful lot of the ground with the Q&A with the officers, so I would hope we could kind of focus our minds on some essentials in relation to debate, because I think we've covered it. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with you. I think we have covered a lot of the ground, which is why I would like to move my alternative recommendation, which is on the paper in front of you. Interestingly, I think all of the points that I've listed have actually been covered by Jean in her presentation or by the questions and answers. So I do think that it would be great if we could have some sort of cross-party initiative that says we're not here just to note this fantastic work that she's doing. We would actually like to be more open working partners with her on that. I note, for example, that she says that she doesn't have the power to go into schools, whereas Councillor Mrs. Osselton has been welcomed in, which is absolutely great. But wouldn't it be good if we've got lots of new head teachers in our schools at the moment to show them that as a cross-party group, the Community Wellbeing Group would actually like to offer any support that they feel we could give them. That is one of the points that we make there. Borough Council supporting partnership working directly between our schools, and that would include the business partners in the town, as Chris said. I think we can actually do something there. It's not just sitting here noting it and thinking, well, that's very interesting, and going home again. Contacting all head teachers of Basingstoke schools, so following up the good initiative that Councillor Mrs. Osselton has already done, but making sure that if she doesn't get through the final 6 in her time, I'm sure she will, but that could be a continuing momentum for this committee. Undertaking a scrutiny review of educational issues within the borough, so all the questions raised this evening can be answered and understood fully with the assistance of relevant officers. Jean herself has said several times tonight she would welcome coming back to talk to us further. I think we've all got a greater appetite now. We've got a greater understanding than perhaps we did 2 hours ago, and I can see that there is a key desire for us to understand that if educational attainment isn't key to our community well-being, then I'm not sure what is. Educational attainment is absolutely crucial to community well-being, and there's this conundrum that as a district council, officially we have no control over education. But here is our golden opportunity not to sit back and note, but to say, actually, we want to do a bit more than note. We would like to move forward on the recommendations I'm putting forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Is that amendment seconded? Yeah. Thank you.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bean?
Thank you, Chair. I would actually like to put forward an amendment to the amendment. Sorry.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, I think, it's not got too oh, right, yeah, I know. Anyway, I recognise and appreciate the principles behind the amendment this evening, but having heard the contribution from the portfolio holder this evening, I think in terms of what's in this amendment already, I think she's clarified she's already undertaking this work. So I agree with points 2.1 and 2.2. 2.3, from 2.3 to 2.6 onwards, this is where the change comes in. 2.3 would become the committee requests to take up the County Council's offer to visit the committee regularly to update on school performance. 2.4 would be to note the work the Cabinet Member for Partnerships is undertaking with the schools in the borough. And 2.5, that the committee requests that the Cabinet Member for Partnerships reports back to the committee on her work.
Is that seconded?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Musson. I think from a protocol point of view, we take the last amendment first, if we're going to vote on it. Is that correct? Okay. So we're going to take a vote. Does anybody want to hear that amendment to the amendment again? Yes?
Right, so it would remain as on the original amendment. It is recommended that the committee, 2.1, notes the contents of the report and the summary of educational attainment in the borough as presented by Jean Thorpe. 2.2, notes the importance the committee places on education within the borough and recognises the dedication of teachers working in the borough. 2.3, the committee requests to take up the County Council's offer to visit the committee regularly to update on school performance. 2.4, notes the work the Cabinet Member for Partnerships is undertaking with the schools in the borough. And 2.5, the committee requests that the Cabinet Member for Partnerships reports back to the committee on her work, and that would be the end.
Okay. I think in as much as we have an amendment and then an amendment to the amendment, we need to move into a vote on the amendment to the amendment, because we take the... Councillor Hussey, do you want to hear the amendment to the amendment? Okay. Councillor Eyre, would you like to repeat your amendment that has been seconded by Councillor Cousins, and then for Councillor Hussey's benefit we will hear the amendment to the amendment as proposed by Councillor Miss Bean and seconded by Councillor Musson. Is that correct, Tim? I think we're all right. Okay, Councillor
Eyre. My amended recommendation is as per the paper which was placed on each councillor's desk. I don't think I need to read it out loud, but I do think we need to allow Councillor Hussey time to just read that through.
Okay, now you didn't hear the amendment as proposed by Councillor Miss Bean, so I'll ask her to read that out to you now.
if perhaps I just explain that it's in light of what the portfolio holder has said to us this evening. I think she's covered a lot of what's in the original amendment, hence why I'm amending the amendment. So 2.1 would stay the same, and 2.2. 2.3 would become the committee requests to take up the County Council's offer to visit the committee regularly to update on school performance. 2.4 would be notes the work the Cabinet Member for Partnerships is undertaking with the schools in the borough. And 2.5 would be the committee requests that the Cabinet Member for Partnerships reports back to the committee on her work. Yeah. Notes the work that the Cabinet Member for Partnerships is undertaking with the schools in the borough. So the Cabinet Members explained, as I said, a lot of the points in here, they're already being done, and that's been explained this evening. And 2.5, did you want me to go to 2.5 again? Yeah. The committee requests that the Cabinet Member for Partnerships reports back to the committee on her work, and it would end there, so there would be no 2.6.
Could I ask, your variation of 2.3, for instance, what do you see different in what you've said to what's down here? It would be very helpful for me to know that.
Okay, as I understand it, the sorry, you're not finished.
It kind of back.
I've heard it 3 times already,
Yeah.
so I'm okay with it. Councillor Bound.
Asking Councillor Bean, well, she could explain the difference between her amendment to the amendment 2.3, so I can get it clear in my mind. What is what's the difference and what's the same?
I think it was just simplifying it and making it short. This was quite a long amendment, and essentially I'm not replacing as such 2.3 with that. It was just 2.1 and 2.2 I'm happy to agree with, but 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 and 2.6 I would like to replace with what I've advised you of. I just think it's simplifying it slightly.
Could I suggest that I do understand where Councillor Bound's coming from, and I think perhaps what we're trying to say here is it's the Cabinet Member. Where it says in the original proposed amendment, it says the committee resolves to undertake. I think what we're trying to say is that we recognise that it's the Cabinet Member that's going to be doing this, and so perhaps I could suggest that what we're doing is placing 2.3 in the hands of the Cabinet Member rather than saying No, we're not saying away from the committee, because we're also saying that Cabinet Members are going to come back, and that's in that's our proposal for 2.5. So all we're doing is saying as Councillor Bean said, the Cabinet Member's doing some work. We want to recognise that and encourage her to do some more and come back and report to the committee. And I think some of this proposed amendment to the amendment is actually recognising that, rather than not saying, for example, how it's going to be done.
Councillor.
In the spirit of trying to find a resolution to this, as the mover of the first amended recommendation, I would be happy, having heard from Councillor Mrs Otterston, because I did not know that when I wrote this that she was in the middle of meeting all head teachers of Basingstoke schools, I would be happy to remove recommendation 2.6 if we kept the 2.1 to 2.5 as written, understanding that clearly this committee might achieve this by asking the Cabinet Member to continue the work that she's doing.
So let me be clear, Councillor. You're not saying that you want this committee to undertake that work. You want this committee to ask the portfolio holder to continue to do the work she's doing. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, and I'm conscious I'm not a permanent member of this committee, but what I understand is that this committee may not have known until this evening what the Cabinet Member was doing. I've also said that if educational attainment is not a community well-being issue, then I don't know what is. Therefore, it is my belief that educational attainment should be overseen by this committee. If this committee then asks the cabinet member to continue the work that she's doing in order to expedite the issues that they perhaps support me on with this amended recommendation tonight, I'd be perfectly happy with that, yes.
Okay. Now, what I understand is that we've heard from the portfolio holder that she's doing certain work, which we applaud, presumably, and we'd want to continue. Are we saying that we want this committee to endorse the work that she's doing, support the work? Just a second, Councillor. Endorse the, well, it may be a word that sticks with you, Councillor Hussey. What I'm trying to get at is we've heard from Councillor Mrs. Ostleton. She's doing work that is on our behalf, if you like, and on behalf of the borough. Is it something that this committee can accept in terms of continuing to support the work that we've heard the portfolio holder is already doing, and ask her to report back as she does it to this committee, which completes the circle in terms of communication and dialogue? Certainly can, Councillor Hussey.
Just briefly, about the role of this committee, and this amendment clearly states that this committee should scrutinise, rather than rubber stamp and endorse the same words for me, at least in my thesaurus they are. And I'm very happy for the work that portfolio is undertaking and working teams undertake, but we should still scrutinise it here. It's a very key word. This is meant to be partially a scrutiny committee. If you take that away and just rubber stamping, we may as well abandon the committee altogether.
Thank you, Councillor Hussey. I was of the interpretation that that's what we would be doing anyway when we're asking the portfolio holder to A, continue the work, and B, report back to us so we can scrutinise the work that the portfolio holder is doing, has been doing, and clearly wishes to continue to do. So the scrutiny element remains, because we would still be requiring the portfolio holder to report back and for us to make comments and direction, if that was the case, to recommendations to the portfolio holder. This committee does not need to be the scrutinising body that's being suggested in the First Amendment. We're asking the portfolio holder to continue to do that work, and we will scrutinise, if you like, the work that she's doing and make some judgments on it over time as she reports back to this committee, as is normal, as I understand it.
Chair, yes, I think we're all trying to pull together on this one, but I think the amendment to the amendment is worded that we allow this to happen, note this, and allow the cabinet member to do the work that the cabinet member is doing. So if we're going to vote on those particular words, it isn't the essence. I think what we're all saying, it's a play on words, and I think we've got two motions that are more or less saying the same thing. Dropping 2.6 about contacting head teachers, because you've already done, the portfolio has done that. We don't, it's just, we're only asking to examine and see if we can actually contribute. I think it's the contribution piece, taking everything that everybody's doing, and so I think we're just debating wording. Yes, exactly, wordsmithing or whatever that word is. Thank you.
Thank you. So when we come to 2.3 of your amendment, Councillor Eyre, when it says this committee resolves to undertake a scrutiny review of educational issues within the borough, are you saying that should be independent of and separate to the work that the portfolio holder's doing, that we have a potentially a separate function? Because I don't see that the scrutiny process is set up for that purpose.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just wanting this committee to have the ownership of that scrutiny, knowing that the portfolio holder is actually undertaking the work.
No, I think you summarised that well.
Okay, right. Yeah, we're going to move to a vote then. Now, I'm going to take some guidance from the lead officer in terms of which we do first. if I could gain his attention, it would be really good. Sorry. Thank you, Tim. I just need some guidance in terms of what we take first. Do we vote on the first amendment, or do we vote on the amendment that's last on the table, as it were?
Hi, hello. Okay, my understanding is we've got an amendment to the recommendation. Now, Councillor Bean has put forward and been seconded some suggestions for changes. Now, if Councillor Eyre and Councillor Cousins are willing to accept those, we can go forward and vote on that. If that's not willing to be accepted, we can then go back to the original motion and vote on that and see if that's original amendment, sorry. If that amendment isn't accepted or it gets passed, then that's fine, done. If it isn't accepted, then we can then debate a bit more around the amendment and things. That's my understanding. Okay?
That's cutting through the fog very nicely there, Shelley. Thank you very much. Councillor Cousins.
Not wishing to put any more fog in the way, but it was suggested from Councillor Eyre to amend the amendment, which would be to offer 2.1 to 2.5 as written and drop 2.6. So if that's the last recommendation on the table, which I will also second, am I correct in my understanding that that is the one that we would vote on first?
Yes.
Then it would be the recommendation by Councillor Miss Bean. Then it would be the original amendment to the recommendation, followed by the original recommendation in that order.
Let me just clarify the status of the amendment to the amendment to the amendment, which is what we've got to. And I'm not sure that the amendment to the amendment to the amendment, because we had Councillor Eyre's amendment, we had Councillor Miss Bean's amendment, then we had Councillor Eyre's amendment to Councillor Miss Bean's amendment. Now, if your argument is, I hope you're listening, Tim, if your argument is that that your amendment to the amendment is the last one that we should now vote on, is that correct? It doesn't sound right to me, because we're running away with numbers of amendments.
I think based on the information that Shelley gave us, you can't have an amendment to an amendment to an amendment and vote on that final amendment, right? You can't do that. What we've got to do, if the committee don't accept the first amendment, then we'll need to vote on the original amendment that was put forward. Following that, if that wasn't carried for the sake of argument, then we'd need to look at the amendment on the amendment to the amendment. Yeah.
Councillor Leslie.
I think we vote on Councillor Mrs Bean's amendment.
Yes.
If that succeeds, that's the end of the matter. And if that fails, then Councillor Ayres can amend his own amendment at that point. So he's now prepared to drop 2.6, and so that we can then vote on that. And if that fails, then we... That is a much more logical way to proceed.
I think that's very helpful, actually, because it actually goes back to my understanding that we vote on the last amendment on the table, but we can't keep on accumulating amendments and call that the last one, which doesn't make any sense at all. So what Councillor Hussey is... Sorry, Councillor Godson.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. It does strike me as that we're chasing our tails a bit here, because, you know, whether or not the committee likes to feel that it has control of the scrutiny process, as opposed to the portfolio holder having control of the scrutiny process, the fact remains, whoever has control, whatever decision this committee makes, only goes to the portfolio holder as a recommendation. So that being the case, does it really matter whether we have control over the scrutiny process or... Yes, but all I'm...
Okay,
Of course
can we
should.
have one speaker at a time, please?
Sorry.
Have you finished, Councillor Godson? Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, Councillor Godson's point is right, that ultimately it will be for the portfolio holder to decide the way forward, and this committee can only make recommendations and suggestions. I'm content to go with Councillor Hussey's suggested way forward, that we vote on the amendment to the amendment as proposed and seconded by Councillor Miss Bean and Councillor Hussey. Okay? Right, now, all those in favour of Councillor Miss Bean's amendment to the amendment? All those against? Okay, that's defeated. We now go back to Councillor Eyre, who will offer the amendments to his amendment. And we'll vote on that.
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
I would like just to amend my original amendment, amend my original recommendation by dropping 2.6.
Thank you very much. We will now vote on that amended amendment. And we've all got that in front of us, and with the exception of 2.6, we are voting on 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5. Everybody clear? So, all those in favour of that amended amendment? I think that...
Unanimous.
Well, excellent. Now there's democracy for you, I think. Okay, I mean, I think the bottom line really is the line that Councillor Godison has invited us to leave on, and that is that almost whatever we say here, as everything else does go from every, not just this scrutiny committee, but every other, it will go to the portfolio holder anyway. Yeah, I'm not disputing that, Councillor Mrs. Wooldridge, and I think that was a fine example of democracy alive and well in Basingstoke. All right. Okay, I think we're all done. Councillor Hussey. Okay, thank you very much, folks. I think that was a good committee meeting, and see you all in January for the next one. Yeah. Thank you very much. Before you go, if you want a copy of the presentation.
I think someone changed their stance along the way, because I was getting text saying they've changed their mind.
Who?